Be Jewish in Britain today. This week follows in an hour here on BBC One after lively debate with David Dimbleby.
Tonight we're in Wrexham, and welcome to Question Time. And good evening, whether you're watching or listening at home, to our audience here, and of course a big welcome to our panel. The Conservative Culture Secretary, Sajid Javid, the former Labour Cabinet Minister, Peter Hain, Plaid Cymru's Shadow Economy Minister, Rhun Iorwerth, the Daily Telegraph blogger, Kate Maltby, and the feminist, author and critic, Germaine Greer. And just before we take the first question, as always, a reminder, join us by text or by Twitter. Hashtag BBCQT, follow us at BBC Question Time. If you want to text us, 83981, and the red button will tell you what others are saying. Our first question comes from Laura Young.
Is the NHS worse in Wales than in England?
Is the NHS worse in Wales than in England? This was the contention of the Prime Minister in an angry exchange in the House of Commons this very week, blaming Labour for the condition of the NHS in Wales and saying, therefore, they couldn't be trusted with the NHS in England. Sajid Javid.
Well, look, I'm very proud of our NHS. I want it to be brilliant for everyone in Britain. But if you just look at the facts, if you look at the performance statistics for Wales versus the rest of the United Kingdom, it is worse in almost every category, and that is very, very sad. The challenges the NHS faces are the same throughout the UK, and we have to deal with them. People are living longer. It's a great thing, but it puts some more pressure on healthcare. There's great new treatments, and they cost more money. And the way we can deal with them is, first of all, make sure the resources are available, that we spend enough on the NHS, and that's what's been happening in England and in Scotland, for that matter. And also, we make sure that we can get it as efficient as possible. So
that's talking about England, so why was Wales singled out?
Because precisely Wales has not done that. Wales has cut spending on the NHS by 8%. Wales has increased bureaucracy, not invested in doctors and nurses, and the results are self-evident. So I think this is clearly a big issue for people, because we all care about the NHS, whether there's an election on or not. And if people outside of Wales want to know what would happen to an NHS if Labour ran it, they only need to look here.
Okay. Peter.
Well, look, there are problems in the NHS in Wales, like there are crises in the NHS in England, and I'll come to that in a minute. What I object to is the Prime Minister and now his Culture Minister repeating this mantra, singling out Wales for a naked party political reason, not on the facts, but actually what I regard as a despicable attack on the NHS in Wales. And actually, if you look at the key statistic, what do people in Wales think of their own NHS? 9 out of 10 are happy with it. What is the figure in England? Just 6 out of 10. Down from what it was under Labour of 7 out of 10. Now, that doesn't mean to say there aren't problems. When you've had the nearly £2 billion of the Welsh Government's budget cut by the Tory Lib Dems in Westminster, of course there are going to be problems. What else have we got? We've got an older population. We've got a population mostly concentrated in the south, the industrial South Wales, where there are high levels of deprivation and industrial injury, which means much more pressure on the health service. And yet, we've got a much better record on discharging patients. They get better care, because what has happened in England is 150,000 elderly patients who used to get care from their local authorities now no longer do, because of the cuts in local government and local care. In Wales, we don't have that at all. We have problems because of the cuts and simply because all health services have problems. But I think this idea is about a war on Wales, and that phrase that the Prime Minister used, that it's a matter of life and death. What is he saying to the English Rugby Union when it comes to play Wales next Friday? That they might die when they cross the border because of the health service. This is absurd, and it's really unpleasant.
Can I just pick you up on one thing? What was the statistic you gave of satisfaction with the Welsh NHS? It was people more satisfied with the Welsh.
The last independent survey showed 9 out of 10 content with the NHS in Wales compared with 6 out of 10.
I have a figure from the Social Attitudes Survey, 29th of January, it's just now, saying 65% of the public in England are satisfied, 51% in Wales.
Well,
75%
that's not
in
the
Scotland.
figure I've seen. But look, I
I don't want to quibble about this.
No.
Can I just pick on the spending point? It's also on the spending point.
I'll come to you. There are many hands up.
Peter made a completely false point on spending as well.
What was that?
Wales gets spending which is 15% higher per head than England. Also, whenever spending on NHS England is increased, Wales gets its proportional share. The problem is the Welsh government uses it elsewhere and wastes it and doesn't use it on the Welsh
because
NHS.
we've invested in social care and you've allowed social care to collapse.
But it's not to do with cuts.
OK, well, hang on.
It is to do with cuts.
Wait a moment. Why, if that's true, what you say, Mr Javid, why has spending on health as a percentage of the overall Welsh budget increased since 2010? There are the figures. You can read them. 37, 41, 42, 42, 43.
Because I'll explain that precisely. Because overall spending, what Wales has, just like the rest of the UK, it's had to cut back. But we in England protected spending on the NHS. The Welsh government did not. So instead of prioritising NHS and healthcare, it put the money elsewhere. It got its fair share of the increase. Whenever England increases it, Wales gets its share, Scotland gets its share. Wales did not prioritise the NHS,
what about elderly care and social care? We invested in that. You didn't. That's why you've got crises all over England.
All right, let's hear from someone. You keep waving at me. You probably want to say something.
Thank you, Chair. Let's put a light to this. Here we are. We've got the Betsy Cadwallader, which is the health board in North Wales. They've lost £78 million this year. They're going to take it off as local councils to pay that back. But the point I'm going to make, Chair, is that they've been closing cottage hospitals, one in Llangollen there, with about 15 beds. We see on national news, not Welsh news, national news, queues of ambulances outside the Myla Hospital here. And why are they there? Because they're bed blocking. And if they'd left those cottage hospitals open, those beds, the people in those beds could have gone to the cottage hospitals and we wouldn't see those queues.
So the question is...
And then we wouldn't have...
No. We can't... One point is fine, but one supplementary point. Are you saying the Prime Minister is right to say to Labour, look at Wales, it shows you can't run a health service?
Because the other thing I was...
No, I just want to ask whether that's what you think.
He's correct.
Is that what you think? Right. OK. I go to the person who asked the question in the middle there, at the back. Yes, you.
Before David Cameron became Prime Minister, he promised a bare-knuckle fight to stop the closure of A&E and maternity units. But there's a list of 11 that have closed since he has been in office. I was just wondering what the panel's opinion was on that, because we need A&E departments, and that could be why people are waiting so long, up to 8-12 hours in ambulances.
Rhun.
I must say, listening to Sajid and Peter there, it's desperate, isn't it? Sajid says that England is better than Wales. Peter criticises him for saying that and then says that Wales is in fact better than England. I want the Welsh Health Service to be the best, not because I want it to be better than England, but because I want patients in Wales to get the best possible health care. There are elements... Elements of healthcare in England that are better. Numbers of people waiting 18 weeks or more for treatment. England is doing better. There are elements of healthcare in Wales. Cancer care, for example, that is doing better than England. I reiterate that point. We don't need to improve our health service in order to be better than England. We need to be looking for the best practices wherever they are, beyond these islands, if that needs be, because the people of Wales deserve better than they're currently getting.
Is the comparison right or wrong? Worse or not worse?
It is not relevant.
Why is it not relevant? It must be relevant, surely.
Because you can take the health service apart and tick a box here to say that Wales is better than England on this bit and that England is better than Wales on the other. What's important is that the Welsh Health Service... Yeah.
OK.
Well, the important thing is that the Welsh Health Service is not performing as it should. The people in Wales are not getting a health service of the quality that they deserve. Well, I'm not in government. I'm not in government. Labour are in government in Wales. I'm in opposition. I want to point out to the Labour government what they're doing wrong.
OK, the woman here... All right, so we have heard from you. The woman here in red.
I'm proud.
I like interventions, but you mustn't be the only one who intervenes.
I'm very proud to live in a socialist Wales where we've got free prescriptions for all.
Absolutely.
I really, I am against this condemned government trying to privatise our whole NHS, take it out of the system of our public hands. It needs to be a public NHS, free for all, something that Aneurin Bevan built in this country, and something that he would be proud of, not something that he would turn in his grave with privatisation.
Does having free medicine, free prescriptions, which of course they don't have in England, does that affect the amount of money that's available for the rest of the NHS here? Yes. Yes, go on.
I'm not a socialist, and I used to believe in privatisation of everything in the NHS. I used to be one of these people who thought that market forces should govern the whole thing, we needed more competition, people should pay for prescriptions. And then I went and spent 3 years living in America. And I have seen people try to haggle over their prescriptions in American pharmacies. I'm so grateful for your question on that point. Because I'm not making this up. I have actually seen people try to haggle for prescriptions. And actually, when I was first living in New Haven in Connecticut, if you walk down poorer parts of the around town, you can see people on the street and you can sort of tell that they probably have had a tough background, and you're not quite sure why you can tell that. And eventually you realise that it's because you can tell they're slightly disfigured. And it's because they may have had minor illnesses they couldn't afford to treat, and they're fine, but they're slightly disfigured. And as a historian, I study the Elizabethan period. I thought we'd left that behind in the Middle Ages. We should never give up on our NHS.
And what's your view about the Welsh and English, which was the question?
Well, this was her question.
No, what is your view about the main question?
I actually agree with Peter on this, in that Wales is different. And you have devolution for a reason. You asked for devolution. And the demographics here are different. That said, Labour has cut spending. I agree with Sajid on this. We've seen today that it's, 999 calls are the worst rates in the UK. But frankly, my main response, just listening to all of this, was to agree with Rhun, who of course is a politician too and wants your votes, like these two. But you're all as awful. You're all as bad as each other.
You agree with all of them, and they're all as bad as each other.
No, I agree with Rhun.
Okay.
But squabbling over statistics. The rest of this programme, you're going to see all of them squabbling over statistics.
Okay. The man up there on the gangway, you sir.
I thought in Anglesey that the chance of getting an ambulance within 8 minutes on a life-critical call at 47% was bad, until I recently found out in South Wales it's 34%. So perhaps the English rugby team ought to bring their own.
Okay. And the woman there in the blue and white stripe, yes.
I've worked for the health service since 1977, and I am passionate about the health service and about patients that I've nursed. When the Tories came to power in 1979, we watched the fall of our NHS as we knew it. I watched them take apart the NHS piece by piece by piece till there was very little of it left. When Labour came to power, they put in what was called the National Standards Frameworks, which we have very little heard about today. Those National Standards Frameworks turned around NHS care. We became the victim of our own success in the fact that we moved things so quickly. The amount of money to continue to expand at the rate we had done meant we needed more money. Unfortunately, global recession hit.
Okay, don't give us the history. Just tell me what you think about the current state, if you would.
The current state at the moment is I feel that we've gone back in time. The Tories have done more damage in the short space of time they've been in government than they did in the whole 18 years that they were in before. The problems in Wales and in England are exactly the same.
All right, okay, Sajid, I better bring Germaine in a moment. You better just answer the direct political point that from 79 the Tories have been
well, first of all, we're not in 1979. Things have changed a lot. The NHS is special to everyone. And that's why, back in 2010, David Cameron made it absolutely clear that the NHS will be protected, it will get more spending, it will be modernised, bureaucracy would be cut, and that's exactly what's happened. I'm not pretending... Look, I'm not pretending everything's perfect, of course not. I mean, NHS is a huge organisation, it's hugely complex, of course there's going to be problems, but the point is that you need to get agreement on the essential challenges and then deal with them. And what I don't like is when you have talk of people wanting to weaponise the NHS, what I want to know is why can't politicians, since we all agree on the NHS... we all agree on the NHS...
When we came to power in 1997, people were waiting years for hip and knee operations. Now they only have to wait weeks or a few months.
Yeah, then you can tell us why Ed Miliband actually said that. But the important point is this. We all agree on the value of the NHS. We all want it to be world-class and free at the point of use. So what people want to know is why can't politicians just get round the table and work out how best to get that?
Well, stop attacking Wales, then.
Germaine Greer.
Well, I'm the problem, I'm afraid. I turned 76 today, and I'm a bed blocker. It's all my fault. I belong to that class of people you see on TV. You only see their feet in their old slippers, or you see their hands as they have a cup of tea. My head, the rest of me gone. I have become a bed blocker, an elderly person. The National Health Service exists in a whole spectrum of care, and you've got a great big missing segment, which is what you do with people who are becoming increasingly dependent. Most people my age are overhoused in houses they can't afford to heat. Yeah. Their health is not being supported by the conditions they're in, and we've got nowhere to put them. It's either in their big house freezing, it's in hospital being a nuisance, or it's in care, which we all know is under-resourced, badly organised. We're not running a health service in this country, we run a national illness service. All you're talking about tonight is emergency care, operations, ambulances. The first duty of a health service is to keep people well, and this health service doesn't do that.
Okay. We've had over a quarter of the programme on this. I'm going to take one or two more points, then we'll move on to another question. You, sir, in the second row there.
I think that all this talk about it's better in Wales, no, it's better in England, as Rhun has said, it's not about which is better. Yeah. And at the same time, you know, the Conservatives say, oh, it's better in England because we're here. Look what Labour are doing in Wales. But wasn't it Labour who tripled health spending in England from 97 onwards after what the Conservatives had done? So I think that when, Sajid, you're saying politicians need to get around the table and talk about X, Y and Z, you're being disingenuous and hypocritical over it because you're not actually engaging with the Welsh Assembly, you're attacking them.
OK. And
we don't run it
a brief point from you. Very brief, if you will.
I'm a doctor and I work in Wrexham and Milo. I work with the elderly, and I think politicians are missing the point. It's health and social care that need to be sorted in order to get the NHS sorted. We have so many elderly patients who are stuck in our beds, and I'm not going to call them bed blockers, but these poor people are there, and there are no homes for them to go into. The main problem is the dementia patients. They need the EMI homes, the specialist homes for looking after them, and there isn't that capability. There's only 4 in Wrexham, none of them have beds, and we have dozens of people in the hospital waiting to go into care. And whilst they're with us, they get more poorly. The bugs that are circulating in the hospital, they're so frail, they're so vulnerable, and inevitably they come out of hospital worse at the end of it.
Dare I ask you to answer the question that Laura asked in the first place, which is it worse here than in England? Or do you not know?
Strangely, I mean, although our NHS budget has gone down, our health and social care budget has been more protected than in England. Exactly. I think both of them together, we're all struggling with different problems, and everywhere the health and the social care needs sorting, and you're not going to fix it by putting in more doctors or more money or better A&E departments if you can't get the elderly patients out into the right place.
So is it... Okay. Right. We better go on to another question, I think. I'm sorry to those who had your hands up. We'll try and get you in on the next one. If you want to come to question time, by the way, join the audience. Our next two programmes, one in London and then one in Norwich. London and then Norwich. The address is on the screen. You apply there. I'll mention that again at the end. But let's take this question from Nigel Matthews, please.
Should countries and people renege on their debt?
Greece, of course, you're referring to, yes?
Yeah.
Should countries and people renege on their debt? Peter Hain.
Well, not as a matter of principle, not ideally, but what Greece has been through is an austerity agenda which is simply disastrous. But what has actually happened since they've had this austerity imposed upon them by the European Union leadership with the blessing of our government? Debt has gone up. A third of their economy, a quarter of their economy has disappeared. Young people, half of young people are jobless. Middle-class professionals are relying on soup kitchens alongside redundant cleaners. They're destroying the society. The way you get change in a country like Greece or any society facing austerity is to invest in growth, get people into work so they pay taxes and the public revenues start to come into balance, as well as making efficiency savings and public spending cuts where you need to. What you don't do is pull the rug from underneath a society, and that is why Syriza won last Sunday, and frankly, I'm delighted they won, because they were standing up for people of Greece and saying we're not prepared to accept this failed austerity policy which is sweeping across the world.
Of course, your question was whether countries and people, and of course people can renege on debt, they can declare themselves bankrupt, can't they?
They can, but would Peter loan me £20,000 and I'll pay him 10p in the pound back?
No, but I'll tell you what we did do. We bailed out the banks by over £100 billion when they crashed due to their own irresponsible policies. Sometimes you have to do these things.
Take Maltby.
Should people or countries renege on their debt? No. That's the answer. Look, I understand why people in Greece have voted for Syriza. And frankly, who amongst us wouldn't be tempted? They've suffered hugely. The unemployment rate, people my age are unlikely to ever have had a job. People turn to extreme parties in this sort of chaos. But first of all, chaos for the Eurozone, obviously a problem for all of us. Financial instability, obviously a problem for all of us. But to talk further about extremism, I mean, if you actually look at these people, if you look at Syriza, the people they've gone into coalition with, the independent Greeks, are very, very unpleasant people linked to anti-Semitism, linked to fascism. And Peter, I know about your very valiant history as an anti-apartheid campaigner, but I'm frankly surprised that you are welcoming a coalition that includes these people. And frankly, a little saddened that you're doing so in when we've just marked Holocaust Memorial Day, because these things don't always happen when extremist parties come in, but they can.
Well, I'm not happy about that, but what I am happy about is the first decisions of the government: abolish charges for prescriptions, abolish charges for hospital care, give people back jobs that have been taken away from them and pensions, and to renegotiate their debt on a more sensible basis,
also
not to renege
renege on sanctions against Mr. Putin. That was one of their first actions as well, and that does serious damage to Great Britain's interests.
The biggest thing they should do, and the biggest thing the European establishment should respond to, is to renegotiate their debt conditions and their loan restructuring so that they get a more sensible, long-term, lower interest rate basis for paying back their debt. That's what they want.
The man in the pink shirt there.
The new Greek government are now saying they will not pay their debt. What I'd like to know is what is going to, if they renege on any of it or part of it, are other countries going to follow their idea? There are other countries struggling with the euro.
Germaine Greer.
Well, it's an interesting issue because, if I'm not mistaken, Europe has decided to go for quantitative easing. So it's going to print money. That's almost the same thing. They realise they have to prime the pump in the stagnant economies of the rest of Europe, and they're doing it, and they can do it. Now, countries have reneged before. Argentina, I seem to remember, reneged on a massive debt because they had to rebuild their economy, which is what they did and what they have done. They got away with it. But what people don't want you to realise is that you could get away with it. In the end, we come down to this big problem of whether money is real, whether the things we call value are really value, whether they're stable in any sense at all, or whether it's all a colossal con. If you actually look at what happened with the banks, they got away with it too, and they decided it was our debt. We hadn't had any of that money, but we've had to pay it back. Wait and see. If the Greeks get away with it, good luck to them, is all I can say.
Isn't it wrong, though, that the EU should impose such extreme austerity on Greece, when surely, when you started off on the euro, they should have looked into all this and seen what was potentially going to come further down the road and stopped it happening? What they actually did was they allowed Greece to get further and further into debt, and obviously they could have cheap debt because of being in part of the euro. Should they not have actually seen that coming and put the brakes on sooner?
Sajid, Javid, you have heard a lot of applause here for the idea that Greece should be allowed to just give up its debt.
Yeah, well, first of all, this is a desperate cry for help by the Greek people, and I understand that. I think everyone understands that. When you're in that kind of situation, you will look for any kind of alternative. To first answer the question, should they default, only if you're prepared for things to get a lot worse before you have any chance of them getting any better. And I say that with some knowledge of this because in my previous life, one of my jobs was to help advise countries that were near default or had defaulted on their debt. And that's what happens if you do default, and countries have done it in the past. Things will get worse before you have any chance of them getting better. And you have to be ready for that.
Which countries were these?
A lot of Latin American countries borrowed too much money in the 1970s, and many of them eventually defaulted and then had debt write-offs.
You said you were advising.
For some of them, it actually made sense. Ultimately, it made sense for them because things had got so bad that they were prepared and they realised that by taking that kind of really severe course of action, it could get better. But
does it make sense for Greece?
No, but in Greece, it's very different. The situation is very different. First of all, because the gentleman just mentioned the euro. The euro is a problem for Greece. The euro is a currency that's looking for a country. And until it finds that country, it's going to continue to cause problems for all its members. And that is what Governor Carney was referring to yesterday when he talked about in a country, if there was one country, if the Eurozone was one country, then rich parts would help poor parts. We're a currency union in the United Kingdom. That's what happens. And so that is part of the problem. But another part of the problem is its problem actually isn't really austerity. That's not the issue. See, austerity is really another word for saying you must live within your means. Everyone has to live within their means, and that includes countries. And when you don't live within your means, then things like this happen. Right. Your economy goes down, and that's what happens. Now, in the case of Britain, we've had to live within our means. Because we've done that over the last few years, we're moving towards a process where we will fully live within our means, and we've had some structural changes. We have one of the world's fastest growing economies. We have more people employed than any other time in our history.
Sajid, austerity is not about living within your means. On reneging on debts, we're not talking about total reneging on Greek debt anyway, but to answer the gentleman's point at the back, if you do get into credit card debt trouble, what you do is renegotiate. So it's quite right now that Greece should be able to renegotiate its debt. Plaid Cymru, the Party of Wales, we're against austerity. We're looking forward to building an anti-austerity alliance after the election in May. We're glad to have Peter Hain on board now, and it's a shame he can't quite yet persuade the Labour Party, who have agreed to continue austerity into the next Parliament if they win the election. But nobody yet has mentioned the comments made by the Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, yesterday, and what they mean for us here. What he is saying is that wealthy countries in Europe cannot continue to squeeze the poorest countries until they squeak. There are analogies for the UK. Yes, he says that things are different in the UK, but we cannot continue to have a position here where the wealthy parts of the UK, wealthy London, growing London, continues to squeeze us, whilst children here are living in poverty, whilst communities are having the life sucked out of them through austerity. What we need, the Conservatives The Conservatives had every right to have a go at austerity when they won power in 2010. When you see that you're making a dreadful mistake, it's time to put your hands up, and now is the time for governments in the UK, whoever it might be after the May election, to say, we got it wrong, we've got to invest for the future.
Okay. The woman on the side there.
Where's this money to?
The woman here.
Hi. I would just like to know, really, if this is the beginning of the end for the Eurozone. What's
your view?
Yeah, things are crippling, and I'm glad that we've kept the pound and we're out of the euro.
Okay.
On a more local level, we've been talking about squeezing until the pips squeak. In this country, we're allowing big businesses to squeeze their small suppliers by making them wait 120 days before they get paid. Surely that's adding to austerity.
And you, sir, over there.
Well, the original question was put about countries and people, and everybody's gone on about countries, but what about the people? I'm in a local business down the road, and a lot of people don't care about the debt. I've got good customers that pay, but I've got customers that they run up a debt, they don't pay it, you phone them, they don't want to pay you, nothing you can do.
And do you think the same should be true of countries as you would like it to be of your customers?
Well, people just don't have morals. Some people don't have morals or scruples.
And do you think governments don't have morals or scruples?
Well, there's no value to money anymore. Everything's done online. You hit the buttons, the money's disappear.
Okay, and one more point from you, sir, and then we'll move on. Yes.
I think the problem is that this is only just the start. I mean, if you look at Spain, for example, their elections are due in May. Podemos are starting to grow because when people are being squeezed, as we say, they will vote for somebody who promises them that they won't be squeezed. They'll do something about it. The problem is that these countries don't do anything about it. I mean, I've lived in Spain for a few years, so I've got an example which I think is really interesting, which really shocked me, which is if you want to be self-employed, and we all know that the backbone of a country is small businesses. So if you want to be self-employed, once you register to be self-employed, you have to pay effective national insurance of €260. It doesn't matter how much you earn. If you earn €10, you still have to pay it. Okay. And that's the sort of thing that needs to change in these countries. Okay. It needs proper thought-out things, but actually what's going to boost the economy.
Okay. I just want to pick up with Labour and Conservative, the point that Rhun made, which is the mood of expressed in Greece of an end to austerity, and he talked about the need to end austerity. Do you believe there's a need to end austerity? Do you believe there's a need to end austerity after the next election? Has Greece shown the way?
I don't know that Greece has shown the way because it's in a particularly dark hole, but we are in the wrong economic place, in my view. What happened at the beginning of this Parliament is when growth had just started to, in a small and hesitant way, occur under Labour when we left office. It was difficult bringing back from the global banking crisis, caused not by Labour spending too much in hospitals and schools and police, but actually bailing out the banks as we had to do, or we'd have all been on our backs. And, you know, $1 trillion was spent bailing out the banks. That's the root of this austerity. I think we should be going back to the principle that happened after the Second World War. This country was on its back. We had massive debts. Borrowing and the deficit was sky high. What did we do? We built the health service under a Labour government. We invested in jobs. When you get people into jobs, they start paying taxes. Right. Businesses start paying taxes. That's what we should be doing, and that's what Labour will do.
Sajid.
Well, we've already done what Peter has just said. The country's already been through that. That's what happened during 13 years of Labour government when Peter was part of that government. And what we saw was more borrowing, more spending, more debt.
That was caused by
and
the
as a result, we had an economic crisis. We had the deepest recession in almost 100 years.
That was the banks,
1 million more people unemployed.
He didn't interrupt you. Let him speak.
Peter, I would like to finish, if I may. We've tried your way. We've tried your way of just spending. We also have to think how money is earned. And if we ignore that, then we will not achieve any of the goals that we want in terms of good public services. We've got a plan that's working for this country. If we abandon that plan, we'll go right back to 2010.
All right. I'm moving on. Kath Jones, please. A question from Kath Jones.
Coal mining historically made a significant contribution to Wrexham's economy. Wouldn't the development of our local shale gas reserves be a logical progression?
Wrexham used to have 38 pits, I think, and 12,000 people working in coal mining. So the question is, wouldn't shale gas reserves be a logical progression? Germaine Greer.
Well, I think there's a good deal of misunderstanding about what shale gas mining really involves. People think it can be resisted by locking gates and so forth, when in fact it can't, because you don't own the minerals under the soil. They belong to the Crown, and the Crown can dispose of them. So if people have exploration permits, you've got to let them in. Now, there are ways for governments to manage this, but they don't seem to be interested in doing it. I mean, I speak as an Australian. For us, CSG mining, coal seam gas, has become a really painful issue. And it's a situation in which people trying to negotiate with the miners for a decent deal that means their lives are not entirely disrupted by their explorations, which start first. They don't know what the terms are of the negotiation. It's confidential. There's no earthly reason why it should be confidential. The government should set the tariff and everybody should know what it is. But it is pointless to resist by trying to keep your doors locked and your gates shut. Now, the most important thing about shale gas is that it might be a way of stopping us burning coal. And I speak as an Australian, and we're shipping it out as if there was no tomorrow. And if we keep doing it as fast as we are, there will be no tomorrow. So I desperately want them to stop exporting burning coal, whether from South Africa or Australia or Canada. The planet needs us to do that. Now, shale gas is a cleaner fuel. It is also much cheaper to produce. And our real problem is that the Americans have cut their energy costs by something like 60% because they developed shale gas mining, which they did when their oil reserves became so low that recovery from the ground became impossible. So they began pumping in all kinds of slurry and water and gas to get the remaining oil out, and then they developed this industry, which they've done, if you like, for the rest of us. They've actually brought it to a...
And you'd like to see that in this country?
Well, the thing is, I think it's important to think what all the issues are. We're probably going to lose North Sea oil mining because it's too expensive. And then you think, well, do we really have to mine the Arctic? The question is, can we do without energy? And the answer to that is no. Now, it's all very well talking about renewables. We don't develop them anywhere near fast enough. I can't believe that solar panels haven't developed at all in 80 years. They're still clumsy, they're still expensive, they're still inefficient. We should be able to build whole buildings out of photovoltaic materials, but we can't.
I want to stick with fracking, if I can. The person waving up there, yes.
I don't believe that fracking is safe. I don't believe that it should happen anywhere near any population or civilization in this country. It's been proven to be dangerous. If the British population want to see evidence of that, they just have to Google list of the harmed in Pennsylvania. It is not right for the government to be able to dig underneath people's homes, to cause sinkholes, to cause earthquakes, to cause poisoned aquifers. And with respect, Peter Hain, Labour have just given a lot of amendments to the infrastructure bill. Those amendments do not go far enough.
But you're going to
improvement.
Are you going to have fracking here?
Down the road in Boris.
Yes.
Very close to Wrexham.
And Labour turned down an opportunity to vote for a moratorium on fracking this week, which Plaid MPs voted for. The question is fracking a safe way forward? Answer, we don't know. And if don't know is the answer, well, no to fracking for the time being. Scotland have got the rights. Scotland have the rights to call a moratorium on fracking. They've decided to go for that moratorium. We should have the right to decide in Wales, and I've no doubt what the people of Wales would say. We should wait and have a moratorium. And even in frack-mad United States, New York State decided last month, no more thank you, we're not convinced about the safety of this. So I'm out for the time being.
All right. It's not there. Yes.
Fracking's been banned in Denton in Texas. It's also been banned in Germany and France as whole countries. due to the risks and the unknown risks of fracking. As a lady said earlier on, she pointed out some of the risks. I personally think that we need to research it more before we take the risks. Here in Wrexham, there's a strong feeling, anti-fracking feeling, and we don't feel that we're being listened to at all.
Absolutely.
Our own council has expressed, they've said no to fracking, and somewhere between, I don't know, well, Westminster and Cardiff, it's been overturned. Why?
Sajid Javid. Why does it overturn?
The answer to the lady's question, the original question, is yes. You see, gas accounts for about 70% of this country's energy needs. That's our electricity, for business, for heating our homes. We need gas, and that need is not going away anywhere. That's just a fact. Now, at the moment, we import 50% of our gas needs. So the question for me, when I look at this, is really this. What's the best thing to do? Should we keep importing that gas at a higher price, sending billions of pounds abroad every year? Or should we pay a lower price and spend those billions at home and create thousands of jobs? The answer for me is obvious.
Peter Hain.
The answer for me, the priority for me, is renewable energy. So I would build the Severn barrage. I would go for renewable energy, and I think if we get elected as a government in May, you'll see a big priority on renewable energy. That's where I think we should be going. On fracking, contrary to what Rhun said, we got a big advance on Monday as a result of a Labour amendment, the only practical one that was likely to pass, with Conservatives having to do a U-turn and support it, with 13 very strict controls, including not allowing fracking in national parks, a lot of environmental controls which protected the environment in order for fracking to be explored and then for us to test, and I agree with Rhun on this, to this extent, to test whether it's safe or not. But I would just say...
So can I just interrupt one thing? Why is it wrong to do it in national parks and not wrong to do it under somebody's back garden?
Well, I was just about to come to that. The much stricter environmental controls, which the Conservatives didn't want but had to bow to the majority in Parliament under a Labour amendment to go forward, those will impose much tighter regulations. And I just say this about Wrexham. I want to see this Conservative government and Sajid and his colleagues actually favouring fracking in West Sussex and places like that, rather than industrial Wales and areas like Wrexham. Then we'll see where the argument is.
OK. You sit at the back in the check shirt there. Yeah, in the very back row. Yes, you.
Yeah, the question that the lady placed over there as to why was the local council overruled? Has the panel got any idea as to why the local council were overruled on the fracking?
Do you have any idea?
Nobody answered that.
Do you know why?
Said
it was
yes,
a political decision.
Is it a Welsh government decision?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a reserved matter for Westminster, these decisions, because of the energy consent situation.
So the democratically elected representatives in this area were overruled because of the potential for money to be made.
To be fair, energy
is that right? Absolutely. Under our houses.
Yeah. To be fair, energy is such a strategic issue of national self-sufficiency and security. You have to have a strategic plan for it. I'm not defending the position in Wrexham. I've made my point clear there. So there are decisions that need to be taken at a UK government level on energy.
Well, the original question was asked by Catherine, and I'd like to thank you for voicing an opinion that I know it's pretty brave to voice around here, which is, and I agree, that when it comes to energy, we need to look at all possible sources. There's been a lot of talk this week about the way we kowtowed over to the Saudis. I mean, seeing the flag lowered over Westminster Abbey, we need to become as self-sufficient as we possibly can in order to break just limit those relationships. But to go back, to talk to the person who raised the issue of the local council being overruled by Westminster, and generally a lot of the anger in this room, the problem for you, there are many problems about fracking for this community, but I noticed that none of you are actually getting the direct benefits. You're going to pay a much higher price than I am in London. And, you know, as a Londoner, I should be honest about this. They're not digging up my road, they're digging up your road. So why aren't you getting a bigger share of the profits? I mean, this is what they do in other countries. And why aren't you being given a bigger decision? I mean, I disagree that this has to be a strategic decision from Westminster. I mean, there is huge...
We don't want our children poisoned. We don't want the profits. We don't want our aquifer poisoned.
I think you should have the choice. You can make that choice for yourself. If you don't want the profits...
Well, we can't, can we? Because the consultation on the infrastructure bill, which 99% of people who responded disagreed with, was overruled.
Yeah, I agree.
So
that's
we don't
the problem.
have a voice,
if you look at other countries, I mean, and generally this is also an issue about localism. You know, in Illinois, towns which get together have collectively bargained for discounts on electricity. You know, I am actually very libertarian on this. I think we need to change our system so that you play a role in the market as a community, and then you can decide whether you want discounts.
Briefly,
place to put everything
Yes.
together, and particularly looking at how we build, that would create jobs. We can harness energy from under the earth. Yes, the photovoltaic should be used far better, and other sources, and the way we insulate our homes. One 5-bedroom house can be heated with one fire, and I can't remember the word. Everyone's got them, no.
Okay.
That's the one, log burner. But it can be done if it's insulated well, it's got the piping for the harnessing. That would create building jobs, so it would work on every level. Triple glazing as standard, not as something that's seen as a luxury. All that would work, and we wouldn't need so much energy. We wouldn't need to destroy our planet. Yeah.
Let's thank you very much. Let's go on. Sarah Hughes, please. Sarah Hughes.
Should we give pregnant women a financial incentive to stop smoking?
Pregnant women, should they be given a financial incentive to stop smoking? In an experiment, women in Glasgow were given £400 in vouchers, food vouchers, when pregnant, if they didn't smoke. Kate, briefly, if you would, because let's want to get another question in at the end.
This is a decision for women to make themselves without being nudged, and I find this very patronising.
You mean you can... So, as a mother, it's up to you if you want to smoke your way through childbirth.
Well, I'm not a mother yet.
No, I wasn't suggesting you were a mother yet. No, I was just saying, as a mother, in
smoking,
general.
yes. Yes.
OK, yes. Germaine Greer.
Oh, well now, I really feel the need to talk to the women involved, really. If they were actually struggling to feed their families, that makes sense to me. What sort of food were they buying? Were they smoking in order to suppress their appetite, because it does do that? I think we shouldn't assume that we know why they did what they did. Let's go and ask them. Let's go and let them tell us their story. But you may have noticed that we don't have women's pages anymore in newspapers, and we don't very often develop the women's side of any story. You know, the most obvious case being, say, Amanda Hutton. Baby dies in Carricot, thrown into prison for 15 years, and yet if you look at her life, you realise it was an ongoing disaster. But no one ever found out what her reality was. We have got to stop imagining that we know why women do what they do. We've got to start asking them.
Rhun.
It is a difficult one. This little interview that I heard on radio, I think it was a couple of days ago, it's not funny. It's about addiction. It's about perhaps very difficult circumstances. A young pregnant woman who was a smoker asked, do you think it's a good idea? And said, yeah, I'd take the money and I'd carry on smoking. It's not funny. It's about education at the end of the day. I think we're getting there slowly. Young mothers need to know how bad this is for their child, for their unborn child. It'll take time, but in the same way as the number of smokers is only coming down rather slowly, we've got to keep on plugging away at this, perhaps without the vouchers.
I'd just like to put in one tiny thing there. They have ways of knowing whether you're still smoking. They take blood tests and so forth, and if they know you're still smoking, you don't get the money.
Sajid, Javid.
How humiliating.
I know someone who smoked a lot when they were pregnant, and the results for their child were horrendous. And that's what I think of. That's what I thought of when I heard this. And I think obviously smoking is bad for everyone, and adults can make an informed decision. An unborn child cannot. So I actually don't find this that difficult. I think it's worth trying new ways if it's an incentive because if you end up protecting that unborn child, it's worth it.
It did, yes. They said the result of the experiment was 20% of the women offered vouchers did stop, compared with 9% who were just trying to persuade. The woman in pink there, up there, then I'll come to you, Peter.
Hi, I'm a psychology student, so I've got a lot of friends with very mixed views on this, and we've had discussions about it today. I personally think it's absolutely disgusting. You've basically said that your baby is worth £400 of food vouchers, and you're selling your child, unborn or otherwise. If someone came up to you on the street and said, hey, would you sell me your baby's left arm for 400 quid? Are you going to go, maybe? You're not going to do it. It's the same sort of logic. So what they need to do is, you're saying you need to educate them. It's not the education. They're aware smoking is bad. Yes. They're going to quit or they're not going to quit. They are. Say to them, look, at the end of the day, you've got the choice. If something happens to your baby, so they've got lung issues or you've got problems in relation to smoking during pregnancy, we're not going to give you that medical treatment in relation to that. And yeah, it might be harsh and it is controversial, but if you put that out there and said, look, this is one option, yeah, but that's the thing. If you say that, people are going to say that they don't work with that, they don't agree with that. In the same way, though, you're offering them money to buy their child's health. There's got to be another solution without wasting money that you can put into hospitals, into NHS.
Right. Peter Hain.
Well, I'm with Kate on this. I mean, on the other hand, if the thing worked, well, I'm not going to say no to it, but I rather doubt that it will work. When we introduced the ban on smoking in public places, there was a lot of opposition to it, but actually it's improved the quality of life for everybody. And at the root of this young mum's decision is catastrophic for a child, as Sajid said. It's also catastrophic for society, because we will pay for the consequences in high healthcare costs for that baby and actually that mum. And we've got to devise policies of working, as Germaine says, with the young women concerned to actually bring them around to a situation where that's not what they want to do.
You've mentioned society. No one's mentioned fathers. I'm just going to throw that out there. Yes, this isn't... But whenever a mother is about to give birth to a child, there are other people involved. No one has talked about fathers here, but I'd also add that there are other people involved in any decision to take food vouchers. When we manipulate people and try and pay them, as the woman rightly said, pay them for a part of their child, we should recognise that there are going to be men trying to get involved in these discussions, there are going to be relatives. Can't we just leave them alone and stop muddying this situation?
Okay. We've got 5 minutes. I want to take one more question from Richard Griffiths, please. Something we've not debated for 3 or 4 weeks here, but has been romping through the airwaves and the House of Commons. Yes, Mr. Griffiths, let's have your question.
Do televised political debates actually inform the public or cement their suspicions about politicians?
Do televised political debates panel, you'll have to be... you'll have to... Yes, you can go. You'll have to be brief on this one. Germaine.
For a minute, I flashed on televising Parliament, where what you discover is most of the seats are empty, which is always a big surprise. And this is the big number. This is the three-ring circus. What you can find out is who deals best with the media, who's the most photogenic, who's the cutest. But I don't think you have a clue what the government is going to be like.
Three-ring with 7 participants, or whatever it is now. I'm not quite sure how many
Well,
we've
you
got.
can have 7 people in a three-ring circus.
Yes, you can, absolutely. 3 times over. Rhun.
After 20 years as a television political journalist, I'm in favour of anything that creates interest in the political system, and I think the success in terms of viewing numbers, if you measure that as success last time round, means that this is an experiment that is worth continuing with. What's vitally important that's happened in Wales this time, of course, is that the election that we'll be fighting in Wales is actually going to be reflected in the televised debates, and that Plaid Cymru will be represented in those debates. For the first time in Wales, we're going to actually have a relevant programme. Hopefully, something substantive will come out of it. Sometimes it's more heat than light, but they're certainly worth having, in my view.
Mr. Griffiths, what do you think?
To be honest, I don't think people's opinions are changed by televised debates, and I'm thinking of the last election. I would really value any politician who would stand up and tell us what they actually think and their policies are without attacking other parties in the process.
All right. Kate, briefly, if you would, and then we'll let our two... Well, we've had one who's going to be in a debate already. We'll let the other two parties come in. Kate.
Yes, I think political televised debates are good for the political process. I'm not sure I agree. I'm not sure people change their mind much, but they may learn a bit more. There are different ways that people learn things. It's because people can be pompous and patronising, like me, and tell the man who talks about morality and money that you really have to see The Merchant of Venice or read it because it's so fantastic on the subject. But what I have learnt, what anyone who's watched American TV debates will tell you, is that the more people you get onto that debate, the less likely to learn anything other than their quick sound bites, because simply the more people you have in that room, the less time they will have, which means you don't get past those opening lines that everyone has rehearsed, because people do rehearse for TV debates. Sorry to explode that myth. And
All right.
I think that's it.
Peter Hain?
Well, I think the public are entitled to television debates. And the fact that the Prime Minister's trying to wriggle out of them, first of all by saying he wouldn't attend and so on unless the broadcasters change their position, which admittedly they have, now saying he doesn't want them during the campaign. I think the broadcasters should be in charge here. I think they should set the rules, and I think we as politicians should follow them. And the public have a right to see us exposed, or our leaders exposed, and debating with each other. That's a fundamental principle.
And having watched them, do you think the last lot informed the public or cemented their suspicions?
Probably a bit of both.
All right.
At one point, Nick Clegg was the star, and then he fell, and then after the election, he absolutely fell completely.
Yes, I was going to say they taught us who Nick Clegg was. That was educational.
No, I think
is
so.
Your leader going to do this?
I think it's a really good question.
Is your leader going to do this?
I think we're getting there.
How long?
Where I agree with Richard in that that I'm not sure if it actually changes people's minds, but it's worth having them, of course. It's informative, and politicians should try to communicate in every way that they can. You know, it wasn't that long ago, I think 20, 30 years ago, 9 out of 10 people used to vote for the two major parties. Now it's only something like 5 or 6 out of 10. So that's one reason I think there should be more key parties involved.
OK. You, sir, on the second row. No, the man in the second row. On the bank gangway, yes?
Well, it seems to me that 3 out of the 4 nations in the UK are being represented. Why isn't Northern Ireland being proportionately represented?
There is an answer to that, Peter Hain.
The thing is that Northern Ireland political parties compete with each other. They don't stand elsewhere. And I think that's the difference. You haven't got Conservative or Labour standing in Northern Ireland, or Liberal Democrat, like you have in Scotland and Wales. And I think that's the difference.
OK. I think we better stop. Let's just have a show of hands. Who wants to see the debates with the Prime Minister taking part in them? Let's just have a show of hands. And who would rather there were no debates? I'll see you later.
Him again.
Him again.
You do him out of a job.
Our hour's up, so we must stop. We're going to be in London next week. We've got the Conservative Education Secretary, Nicky Morgan, on, and her Labour opponent, Tristram Hunt. And we've got the Respect MP, George Galloway. The week after that, we're going to be in Norwich. Now, if you want to come either to London or Norwich, the usual way to apply, the website address is there. Call 0330 123 9988 and speak to us by phone. If you're listening to this on 5 Live, as you know, the debate continues on Question Time Extra Time, but it ends here for us. So my thanks to our panel, to all of you who came here to Wrexham to take part in the programme. Until next Thursday, from Question Time, good night.
Alan Johnson joins Michael Portillo on the sofa this week, and Esther Ranson is Andrew Neil's guest. That's next here on BBC One.